everybody, I am back again, and I didn't expect to be. I thought I'd be a couple of months before I was doing this again, at least. Because last week I posted a little film about what's needed to get Bluebird K7 safely back on the water. And it wasn't exhaustive, it was just the big things. And one of the big things was the lack of a cockpit canopy. Now, I pressed the publish button, I went downstairs for some family time, and 20 minutes later the phone went bing, and it was one of the crew. We've got a WhatsApp group, and it said, "Have you seen this?" And then the phone went bing, 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 as 100 other people sent me the same thing. And it was a little bit of blurb with a poor photograph, and it was from the Ruskin Museum, and it said, "Look at our marvellous new canopy." And I looked at that marvellous new canopy, and I'm going to show you the marvellous new canopy, because I'm a bit puzzled. But first I'm going to show you how the canopy should be, you know, what it was like in '67, what it was like in 2018, and how it's meant to work and how we got it there. So I'll show you this first, and then we'll get back to what's happened in Coniston. Now, what it's important to understand is that the canopy is a very, very critical part for lots of reasons. It's at the very heart of the aesthetic of the boat. It's what makes the image. It's a beautiful thing. It flows from surface to surface with absolute perfection. All the lines work, it's dark and sinister inside. And it is the focal point of any picture or when you go to look at it. And this is one of the reasons why we were so concerned about having the right canopy. But it's not that way just to make it look pretty. It's function as well as form. And Ken Norris did a beautiful job of designing it. And it provides a nice slippery face down the side which leads into the air intake seamlessly. It's got just the right amount of shape at the front such that the air pressure holds it down and pushes it back into its seals. It's designed to be a very tight fit so it can't chatter and rattle, it doesn't make any turbulence, it's not going to move around when the boat's running. It's all but airtight. But to do that, it has to fit perfectly everywhere. And it wasn't guesswork, it was all properly drawn up, and it was wind tunnel tested by Dr. John Stollery at Imperial College. So it's not just a pretty piece of guesswork up there. It actually does a fair bit of work, because I once gave myself a fright. I very stupidly put my hand around the end of the inlet lip with the engine at about 65%. And it immediately grabbed me and tried to pull me in quite a frightening way, because air at that speed isn't like air at all. It's like a fast running liquid. It really is. And when I got a fright, and I never did that again. And this goes past the sides of the canopy, so it all has to go smoothly. Now, when we lost our canopy on FAD, it failed when Ted had come out of the throttle and he was slowing down. The big worry is if it fails when the engine's at high power settings, because two things to concern yourself with there. One is most of it is forward of the pilot, it's here. So if it fails, it's coming this way. And the other thing is, if the engine is at a high power setting and it was to fail, it would just hoover up every bit straight through the engine, and that would be the end of the engine, a big bowl of blade salad behind you. So you can see why it has to be such a close fit everywhere, because the airflow when it's running, as I say, compresses it down into its seals and makes it a very, very tight fit. And the one that we built to get us by on Butte wasn't as good. It had some gaps here because it was never, we didn't have time, we had a day to build it. And both pilots reported that despite it being bungeed to death, it still tried every which way to get off. And they had to be aware of that. And they both said the same thing. So it's got to be right. And this is what we were trying to achieve when we said to the Ruskin Museum, even though the whole thing had gone south, we will still build your canopy. We wanted it to look right, we wanted it to work right. And it's not about Bluebird Project, it's not about Ruskin Museum, it's about having the job right, the bigger picture. Because after I'm gone and the rest of the team have gone and the current crop at the museum have gone, people will still want to go and look at that thing. So a few weeks after the boat had gone, I got a call from the people who did the CAD work for the canopy. Now, they did the surface. You have to understand the canopy is two distinct elements. One is the actual vac-formed acrylic bubble that you sit in, the bit you look through. And the other bit is a frame that runs all the way down each side, round the front of the canopy and up behind the pilot's head. So we get a phone call saying, the Ruskin Museum want your CAD work. What should we do? Because it's yours. We did it for you. We didn't do it for them. What would you suggest? And I said, look, I want this job right. You did everything for us for free. Very kind of you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Why don't you tot up everything it would have cost had we turned up as a paying customer, and charge them, and everybody wins. That seemed like the fairest way to deal with it. So that's what we did, and they got the CAD for the surface. And then a few weeks after that, I got sent some photos of some people in the wing scanning the cockpit opening. Now, this is where I first noticed the fact that all the ceiling foam had been removed. And my first thought then, as now, is, well, you can't make a proper canopy frame unless you incorporate the seals. And a point of note, and I said this in the last film, that is all original material. That foam ceiling was with Donald Campbell on all but one of his successful record attempts, and it was on the boat when it was crashed, and it sank, and we raised it, we put it back. So I'm going to be really interested to see that that goes back exactly as it was, but I've covered this. So I assumed that all this scanning was in order to get the canopy frame correct. They also took the rudder off unnecessarily, but that's another story for another day. So they're scanning the cockpit opening, and I thought, right, well, that's some of your problems solved if you put the seals on. But the canopy, when it's on, is down and back, and when it's open, it's higher. It climbs up onto the foredeck, and if you optimize it for here, it won't fit very well there, and if you optimize it for there, it won't fit very well here. It is a very delicate compromise, and I remember thinking at the time, well, I hope they've scanned the foredeck for the open position to reconcile all of that. And on the subject of the canopy seals, when the canopy beds in and it's latched at the back to hold it there, and then the air pressure pushes it down, there's also 2 rubber sealing strips in the bottom which you have to account for, because that determines the height when the canopy's down. So all of that has to be factored in, but I thought, right, they're scanning it, they're at least going to have some half decent data on how to build a canopy frame. I mean, they had all the same reference photos as us, and we put hundreds and hundreds of photos of the canopy from every angle in a computer and sat and clicked through until it was burnt into our minds what shape it was. And then we made mock-ups on the top of the boat, the cardboard and pieces of wood and welding rods. And then we made MDF prototypes and wooden prototypes. I mean, here is one of the last, possibly the last surviving MDF prototype that we made, and these were routed out and hand finished and fitted to the boat, and then we check it for fit and then mark on, we need 1 millimetre here, we need 2 millimetres there, and then do another one, and we did another one and another one and another one. And when we had that right, then we did the side rails, and they were made up in timber, and they were made so they would fit perfectly onto the seals. And then we did the part that went around the back of the headrest and did all the chamfers, because the chamfers vary as you go around to engage with the seals and keep everything flat down the sides. And when we had a perfect wooden frame, we then moved on to cut it out of acrylic. We just worked on it by hand and sculpted it until we had the shape. And at all times we referenced it back to all the photographs and stood back from every angle and went, yes, that looks correct. So when the scanning was done, I assumed, because now they've got the perfect surface, that the scanning was purely for the frame. That's all it was for. You've got the surface, your scanning is just for the frame and nothing else. So you would think, would you not, that with all this information, the finished canopy in 2025 would be pretty good. It would be close. And I was expecting there'd be subtle differences, but I'd be looking for them and they'd be very subtle. Which brings me back to the picture I was sent last week. Well, not that one, because since then a couple of friendly locals have popped in and got me some more up close and clearer stuff. But I'm going to show you 2025's canopy. And I'll take you through it, one end to the other, explain the various elements that have me slightly puzzled here, and you can make up your own mind. So let's take a look at the 2025 canopy. This face here shouldn't be straight up and down. It should be angled because it's an aerodynamic surface. It's used to push the front of the canopy down at speed. And this profile here should be much shallower and much sleeker. This is what it should look like. And there's the aerodynamic lip, and the canopy roller is wrong too. It reaches much further forward. So that profile is completely wrong. And then you have down here a massive stonking gap. Well, that's just going to let a deluge of water in and a howling gale of wind. You can't have that. And here is how it should look. This is what it should look like. It's a lovely close fit. The wind pressure pushes it down. It closes those gaps down to nothing. It's almost airtight. This is what we've got.
and you couldn't live with that. That's no good. And when you get to the back, it's even worse because the shape is all wrong around the back. There's huge gaps all the way down the side. And when you get down to there, there's a hole. I mean, what's that for? There shouldn't be a hole there, but there is. And it's the same on the other side. It's a bigger hole there. And again, get up to the front, massive gaps to let wind and weather in. It won't tolerate that. But look at this shot. It's even worse. There's your big gap at the front. But look, you could post letters through that one. And that just does not follow the profile. The canopy is completely the wrong shape at the back. So that's no good. But where they've really gone wrong is the fact the canopy frame slides in a track. That is the outer skin of the track. And if you look over here, that is the inner skin of the track over there. And the acrylic canopy frame slides forwards and backwards in that channel to open and close it. Straightforward. Yep. Well, what they've managed to do, by goodness knows what means, is to make the whole canopy about 2 inches too narrow. And then they've had to glue these outrigged bits onto the side to try and make it wide enough so it doesn't just fall into the cockpit if you try to put it on top. They've had to grow it outwards to get it to sit. And this is what's made the massive gaps. Again, there it is on this side. And the problem here, the real knockout blow here, is that that is parallel to that, and it runs round a radius. Now, if those parallel sides are too close together, that radius is wrong. So this whole canopy is completely useless, unfit for purpose, doesn't fit, and needs to go in the bin.
So what is that exactly? I mean, is it a wind-up? Because if it is, it's a good one. Or is it a cock-up? Because it looks to me like somebody armed with only a description, no Google, no books, no pictures, has made what it says on the bit of paper and gone, well, it looks right. And then they've shown it to other people who also have no books, pictures or Google, and they've gone, yeah, it's like what it says on the bit of paper. And then they put it on the boat, and at no point has somebody gone, that's not right, I've got a picture here, that's wrong. But somebody has, because it's been made too small and it obviously fell in the hole, and they've put these extra bits on to stop it falling down the hole. So somebody then could have gone, oh dear, this is all wrong, start again, which is what should have happened. And you've got to wonder why it's done that. And one theory, which I'm leaning towards, is that what they've made is the bastard child of our beautifully crafted surface, which we know is perfect, and whatever they did scanning the canopy, something may have gone wrong in there. In which case, if they've made any other parts to that standard, they need to go in the bin as well. So what's next? I mean, that can't be used. You wouldn't start the engine with that up there. And if you did, you wouldn't go past idle. Because if you did, it would just tear that apart and hoover the whole lot up, and that would be that. And as for putting it on water, less said the better. So what now? There's not very long to fix that. But who was in charge such that it got so catastrophically cocked up? Because if that person is still in charge, are they going to manage it any better? I don't know. Like I said here before, I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm baffled here. But there's not long to put it right, because May, apparently, and there's a lot to do there. So make of that what you will. I don't know. And there's one more thing. One really, really important thing that really gets at me that I didn't mention the last time. I thought I'd said enough, but there's something else that I absolutely have to get on the table because I think it is very, very wrong. But while I have you, in the comments, I didn't expect as many people to watch that little film, but a lot of people did. And in the comments was a lot of interesting questions, a lot of interesting opinions, and I had a thought, because it doesn't take me very long to sit and explain something like this. So if you have any questions, if there's anything you'd really like to know, something that you haven't understood or would just like to get to the bottom of, put it in the comments and I will pick out the juicy ones and I'll sit and film for 10 minutes and I'll explain it from the horse's mouth. And while you're on, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the answer to the question that you just asked. Anyway, what is bothering me here? Yeah, this whole thing is being rolled out. This whole, we're going to run it in May in this pointless week between 2 bank holidays. And it's all going to happen subject to the Park Authority giving the dates. Now, I don't think that's fair. There's only one of two things going on here. Either that's an attempt to leverage the Park Authority, and that's not going to work, or it's just exposing them in a very unprofessional way to the possibility of criticism later on. I mean, I worked with the Park Authority a lot. Well, I say I was never any good at that. It's a bit like, you know, if it looks really out of my skill set, shove it onto someone else's table. I mean, that's why I had Ted doing the driving. Because Ted is a hydroplane racer, and I'm not. And our head of operations, Sir Malcolm Pitwood, he speaks fluent bureaucrat. He can sit with a committee for hours on end without wanting to strangle them all one by one. I can't do that. So we had a lot of dealings with the Park Authority, and Malcolm was in charge. But I was there. It's like on Butte. Malcolm was project manager. I said to Malcolm, look, you do all the operations, the safety briefings and all of that stuff. I'll stay on the tools with the crew and I'll do the media stuff, otherwise you're the boss man. And that's how it played. So Malcolm did all the stuff for the Park Authority while I tagged along being told to sit down, shut up and don't interrupt. And although their kind of cumbersome bureaucratic way wasn't my way, it does have to be that way because they've got a massive responsibility. They have to balance the requirements and the needs and the desires of so many factions. You've got the visitors on the one hand and the locals on the other, and you've got people with holiday lets, and you've got residents, and you've got farmers, and you've got businesses and restaurants and cafes and publicans. And then the environmental people, let's not leave them out. And all these people will want to be reassured in certain ways, they'll want to have their say in certain ways, they'll want to know that business isn't going to go out of business because nobody can get to it for a week because all the roads are blocked, the emergency services. And the Park Authority's job, and there's not very many of them, down at Merley Moss, there's probably a couple of dozen if that, it's their job to make all this balance. And only when it's balanced can they say, all right, we're good to go. And this was the process that we went through with Malcolm to get that balance as close as we could, but it was done behind closed doors. We never once said, hey, we're going to do this big thing as long as they toe the line. That wouldn't be fair. What if 100 different people with 100 different perfectly valid questions rock up at the Park Authority headquarters and say, look, I need this settled before we can sign off on this. There's not enough people or hours in the day to deal with it in any reasonable time frame. So to push them to the front and say this wonderful thing's going to happen, subject to them, is just massively unfair. And then you have a situation where Joe Public very seldom looks deeper into anything that's happening. They say, oh, Bluebird's going to run, therefore it is. You know, it's going to have an engine, therefore it is. And there'll be people organising time off work and booking hotels. And I heard that within minutes of this announcement, the price of certain hotel rooms had gone through the roof, and there's people apologising they're fully booked already, but we'll look after you somehow. It's nowhere near being a thing. So what will happen next year, because the project management hasn't got time to be developed, I don't believe for one second that the Park Authority has enough time to do their due diligence, and certainly the engineering isn't going to be there, at least not to any safe and useful standard. And early next year, the excuses will start. And if all this goes south, which I believe it will, and if it doesn't, mind, I'll be the first to congratulate everyone on a job well done. But I don't think it will work. I think it will fail. And you're not going to have a situation where the Ruskin Museum goes, oh, yeah, he was right. We drastically underestimated what it was going to take to get that boat working properly. And sorry, we dropped the ball. They're not going to say, oh, he was right. We drastically underestimated the scale of planning the event, and we've had to cancel for the second time. They're going to say, oh, the Park Authority hasn't given us dates yet. And Joe Public, who never looks any further into this, is going, oh, terrible Park Authority. And that isn't fair. It isn't fair to put them in that position. Much as I didn't enjoy working with them and didn't always get along with them, I do see their point. And, you know, we were never on fire on them. At least I don't think we were. We might have been. I don't know. Anyway, I might have grown up a bit since then. So get your questions in if you have any. And, yeah, I'll do another one of these for you as and when. Might even be next week. Have a good weekend.